Hello everyone and welcome. In this lecture we'll be adding some polish to our game, so we'll be importing some assets, we'll be changing the post-processing to give it a nice color, we've got the map being a lot bigger now, and we've just started adding in some bits of terrain, so we've got a tree here and we've got some dunes, and we can add in plenty more things as we go on. It's really up to you to design it. And then in the next lecture we'll be adding in some new types of units and then be giving them their own types of unit spawners with their own new building models. Hope you're looking forward to it. Let's get started. So to add the polish to our game, we're going to use some assets that either you can make yourself if you're confident and you want to give that a go, but in our case, we're going to get them off the Unity Asset Store. So let's head up to Window, Asset Store, and then we're going to hit Search Online. That'll open up the Asset Store, and we can search for tanks. And this will show us the official free Unity Tanks project that we can just go ahead and download and open up in Unity. So if we hit open in Unity, but if you don't already have it, it might just say download or add to my assets, but it's free, so there's no need to worry. Then you can hit open and open in the Unity editor. So then we can hit import, and once that's done, it'll say importing will overwrite your settings. Yep, just hit import, and it has dependencies. Let's hit skip, we don't care. And then it'll give us this big list of all the assets, and we don't actually want everything in here. We only want the models and the materials for those models. So let's start on checking everything. We don't need this or this. We just want to keep the materials, so leave that checked, and models, leave that checked. And then we can uncheck everything else. So by the time you're done, you'll be left with just the models and materials. Then we can hit import, and then it's done. So let's close the package manager, the asset store, and what you're left with now is your project, but you have loads of new models and materials. But if I was to go to the scene view and drag in, let's say, this tree, you notice it's a pink tree. That's because the materials use the old render pipeline, and we're using the universal render pipeline. So what you can do is, you can go up to Edit, go down to Render Pipeline, and then click Universal Render Pipeline, Upgrade Project Materials. And then by doing that, it'll go through all your materials and just make them use the new shaders. So if we hit that and hit Proceed, it works, and then everything else on here works too. So if we added some rocks in, and then we add in this building, it's a bit big on here, but you see it works. And yeah, all the materials are fixed now. So let's get rid of these from the scene, we don't want them. And we want to, for the rest of this lecture, just make our terrain ready to be used. So if we get rid of the floor we're currently using, and let's add in the terrain from this models folder. And you notice how it's got this weird gray around the edge, and if we zoomed out, it'll actually be all over it. And that's actually the fog inside Unity. So for what I'm doing, I don't actually want this fog, so let's go to lighting. If you don't see lighting, it's window rendering lighting. And then we want to, on fog, just uncheck fog. Now that gives it a pretty weird yellowy color that I don't really like for this. So what we can do is, if we go to the terrain and go to the material, I actually tweaked the color when I was messing around to make it look a bit nicer. So I'm going to paste that color and show you what I've used is FFBD6C. We also need projectiles to collide with this plane, so let's add on a mesh collider. And we want to move the plane up by 1 unit so that it's the same height that our floor used to be. But our floor used to be a cube, so it had thickness. Now this is a plane, so it's thin. And then if we go to the directional light, I'm going to make it not have a yellow tint, just leave it as white so that, you know, the yellow ground doesn't go even more yellow. So leave it like this, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's up to you. Make it look however you want to make it look. And you can also go up to lighting and tweak this. So instead of using skybox, you can choose your own color for the environment lighting. And, you know, you can make it whatever color you want. And it's a bit easier to see when you add more things into the scene. You know, I'm going to give it, let's say, this old bluey purple sky tint. It's really up to you. It doesn't matter too much. Just whatever you think looks good. We also want to make sure the spawn points are at the correct position, because right now all the players will just spawn really near to the center. So let's take the first spawn point and we'll put it at -40, -40. Then the second one can be at 40, 40, so the opposite corner of the map. And then the next one we're going to want to be at here, 40 and -40. And then the one corner that's left is the -40, 40. So -40, 40. And then for some reason I've noticed the main camera has a rotation of -180. So let's just change that to be 0 on the Y. And we can also, now that the map's a lot bigger, go a bit more zoomed out. So let's put the height to be, let's say, 10. And then finally, I'll change the lighting, the skybox material, to be the default skybox. I think that actually makes it look a bit nicer. I also noticed one other thing, which is when I changed the color earlier of the ground, it actually changed back or something. So if I go here and paste again, you see it looks like this, which is a lot better. So the color I'm using is FFBD6E. And now it's up to you to go through the models and pick some things that you want to put in the terrain. So there's plenty of different types of rocks here, and there's some craters, dunes. You can spin them around, scale them up if you want. It's up to you. We can take the pump jack and put that in there, but we're actually going to be using that for the resource generators, so maybe don't use those. You've got some trees you can stick in here. Feel free to design it however you like. So that's going to be your challenge for this lecture, which is to design the map. Design it however you want, using either models from the asset or just use and create your own. And customize the post-processing to give it a unique feel. So in the hierarchy, we have the post-processing settings, and you can go in there and tweak that. You can tweak the lighting, you can tweak the sun itself or the camera settings. It's really up to you to just make it feel unique. So have a go, pause the video, and I'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. I hope you had fun doing that. I'm not going to sit here now and go through and just, make it perfect. I'm just going to literally chuck some things in and show you the things you need to know, which is, so for example, let's say I left it like this. If we were to go to the navigation tab, which should still be open from last time, and was to hit bake, nothing happens right now, and that's because the floor isn't static. So let's go to the terrain inspector. We need to mark it as static. We'll also need to change the layer to be floor. And then if we go back to the navigation and hit bake, you now see we have this nav mesh. But as it is right now, tanks would be able to just go straight through this tree because the tree doesn't count as an obstacle on the nav mesh. So we need to go back and add in a nav mesh obstacle. And on here, what we can do is we can just hit carve, go back to the nav mesh here, and you actually see it's got the area cut out on the nav mesh. So make sure for any objects that you want to actually, affect the nav mesh, make sure to add on that component and go back to the navigation tab and just check that it all looks correct. So maybe on these dunes, you want them to be able to just go straight over. That's fine, leave it how it is. But for the rest, like this, just make sure that you've got it onto carve. Another thing now is the minimap. So if we go to the minimap camera and just make sure on here that we change the size to be now from 10 to 50, which if you were to zoom out, you now see the corners touch the corner of the floor. So the minimap can now see everything on here. And if we actually go to the minimap itself, so the minimap display, and we go to the minimap, notice here we've got the map scale as 10. So let's change it from 10 to 50, which is the new scale. And now the minimap should work. If I am to head to scene 1, hit play, give it a second, hit host, and we now see that the map, we should be able to click and go to any part of the map, and we spawn at the bottom left, and we can drag in our buildings, and we can drag in this and start spawning some units. Everything still works. So in the next lecture, we can add in some new units using more tank models that we already have in the project, and then when we make those unit spawners, we can use the new building models from this asset pack. So yeah, that's it for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had fun designing your own level. And that's it for now, so I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this lecture, we're going to be adding in some new tanks, some new types of buildings, and just making the game look a whole lot better. You see here what I've already got in the scene. We've got like a new base, a new building for producing medium units, and then we've got a building here for producing small units. And when you're previewing, you actually do see the colors like so. And then you see the same for this building here. And here are our units. They're a lot more responsive now. They're a lot faster. And obviously you can tweak that to be however you like. Whoops, I clicked on the minimap there. But yeah, we've got these nice little super fast cars and these kind of more medium tanks. They're not quite as fast. They're still pretty responsive. A lot better than what we used to have. It just makes the game feel a lot more fluid. One thing I'd recommend for this lecture is not to copy every little thing I do. You don't need to copy paste all the values I use, just have a go at customizing it and making your game unique. With all that said, let's get started. So now that we want to make multiple new units and then buildings for those units, we want to make it as easy as possible. And there is a little bit of tedious stuff we have to do, but it's not too bad once you've done it once or twice. So what we need to do here is we need to go to our prefabs, and just like how we have a building prefab that isn't really anything, just, holding all the components that all our buildings have, we should do that for units too. So if we go to our unit, rather than having this be an actual unit, we'll just have it be a kind of base template. So if we get rid of the model, then that's pretty much it. Everything else, all of the units have the same. Maybe we tweak the size of certain things, but all these components and objects will be here for all of our units. And what I'll do is I'll make one new unit and building with you, and then I'll let you go ahead and create the rest on your own. So if I was to go to this unit, put it in the scene, and then drag it back into my prefabs, I can then say, create it as a variant, a prefab variant. And then I can call it something like the small unit. And then at the same time, I want to do it with the spawner too. So if I go over to the unit spawner, I want to make a small unit spawner. So if we go on here and we get rid of the preview of this building, because they're all going to look different, whereas everything else on here is the same, we can use this as a kind of base template for all the unit spawners. So let's put it in the scene and drag it back into my project as a prefab variant and call it the unit spawner, or the small unit spawner, sorry, and then get rid of both of those from the scene. I need to do it with one more thing, which is the projectile. So we put that in and we can then drag it back, or I'll do this and then drag it back as a prefab variant. And we'll call this the small unit projectile. So now if you look here, wherever it says small unit, I have small unit, small unit projectile, and small unit spawner. The final thing is the actual preview for the small unit spawner. So when we're dragging it in from the buildings, we want to see it in the scene. And we already have the unit spawner preview, and we don't even need this object at all anymore. So let's just rename that the small unit spawner preview. So we've got all the objects we need. And before we start customizing, let's head back to the scene, the menu scene, where the network manager is. And if we have a look on the network manager, we've got these registered spawnable prefabs. And we don't want some of these anymore. We don't want the base unit template, we're not spawning that in. And we don't want the base projectile, we're not spawning that in. We also don't want the base unit spawner. Instead, we want to add all of our new things, so make 3 new spaces, and then go back to prefabs, go to the small unit stuff, and we want to drag in over here the small unit projectile, and the small unit spawner, because those are what we're actually spawning in over the network. If we go back to the other scene now, and we look at our buildings UI, where we have the buttons, we have a button here for the resource generator. We also have a button here for the unit spawner, but we want it now to be a button for the small unit spawner. So let's go to our prefabs, go find the small unit spawner, click on the button again, and drag in the small unit spawner there. The one other thing that needs to know is our player prefab, which is in this folder, so player. And you see here it has a list of the things it can spawn in, and we have the resource generator and the unit spawner. Let's swap that for the small unit spawner. Okay, that's the tedious bit out of the way. Now you can get into the customization. So the small unit, if we have a look over here, we need to give it a body, some visuals, and we have a tank assets folder with tank exports, and we have, let's say, the triple gun car. I want to use that one. I'm going to click on the little eye over here and hide the minimap icon, and let's position it at 0, 0, 0. It's pretty big right now. It's roughly 3 units big, because if we look on the grid, we see it covers up these 2 completely and then a bit of the next one, so it's 2 and a bit. Let's make it a bit smaller, so I'm going to scale it down until it's about maybe 1 unit wide. Then if we go to the next thing, so the minimap icon is pretty big, let's shrink that down. And let's position it so it's roughly in this... Sorry, my Unity just crashed, but we're back again. So let's resize this minimap icon so it fits the tank pretty well. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think that'll do. And then we can just hide that again. The health bar canvas, we'll turn that on, and we'll see it's too high, so we'll move it down. Give it a width of, let's say, 1, and then hide it again. So this is really just time for you to go through and have a little mess with them. So where should the projectile spawn in? probably over here, right in front of the gun somewhere. Let's say there. Where should enemies aim at? They should aim not there, but maybe in the center somewhere like this. When this unit is selected, this highlight is pretty big, so let's scale that down so it's about that big, maybe 1.4. Turn off the sprite renderer. And then finally go through the small unit and just tweak all of the settings that you want to change. So for example, I want this to be a very small and fast unit. So let's set the speed to be something like 7 or maybe 8. Let's actually just go for 10. Let's make them really fast. And then let's make them rotate really quickly too. So I'll put 999 for the acceleration and this angular speed. So they pick up speed very quickly. Stopping distance, it's a lot smaller. So let's go for 0.5. We'll say for the radius, 0.5, maybe a little bit bigger. Maybe about 0.75. So let's actually make the stopping distance match the radius. Then the height, let's say, take that down so it's about there. Height of 1 will do. And then we can keep going. We'll keep going, keep going. The box collider, we can tweak that. So that's the hitbox, remember. If we go to isometric view and look side on, you can get a better idea of how wide the hitbox should be. So if we do this, roughly this will do. Switch to look from the back, bring it in. So yeah, this should be good to go. If we keep going down, the projectile we want to spawn in is the small unit projectile. And the fire range, let's make the range a bit smaller because it's a small unit, and the fire rate could be a bit faster. And then the rotation speed, let's make it rotate really quickly. And then if we keep going down, the health, let's make it easier to kill, put it down to 50 health. And then keep going. And then the renderer, we need to now add in the new vehicle model. So let's drag in the triple gun car. And then there we are, we're done with the small unit. But if we were to spawn in the small unit projectile, let's have a look how this actually is. So you'll see here, it's still pretty big. So we want it to be maybe, let's say about this big. So maybe 0.25. So let's apply that. Not to the base, we want to just remember 0.25 and we'll go into the small unit projectile. So delete that, go into the small unit projectile. And just change the scale to be 0.25. And then we can head back, or you can have a look through here and tweak the damage to deal to be, let's say, 10, for the launch force to be 20. And yeah, it's really up to you just to tweak those settings, and then we can head back. And then the small unit spawner, so this is the final part. So for the small unit spawner, we want the small unit spawner preview, which is currently nothing. So let's go into that. And we don't want this cube, we want to use one of the models out of our asset pack. So let's delete the cube, go to our models, and drag in whatever you want. I'll be using the radar, so drag that in. And it's pretty big right now, so let's shrink it down to be about there maybe. Let's say, we can make it a bit bigger than what it used to be, we'll say 0.4. Then back into the actual spawner itself, let's make the minimap icon the right size, so we can scale that up. Make sure everything's at 0, 0, 0, and then just scale it up on the Y and position it so it roughly covers everything. It's just an icon on the minimap, so it's not a big deal, and then you can just hide it to work with it here. The canvas here, we don't want it to be inside the object, so let's move it up above at maybe 5.5 or 5 will do. And then the canvas, we'll turn that on, bring it up to about 4.25 or maybe 4.1, 4.2, whatever works. And then we'll make it a bit wider, let's say 2, with a height of 0.3. We'll turn the health bar canvas off, go to the unit spawner, and we'll go through all the settings here. So the hitbox right now is not correct. So let's do the same thing with hitboxes where we look at a side-on view. And we just position it so till it's about right. So we'll move these around. And then we'll look at the side, make it a bit wider. Okay, that's the hitbox done. And then we can copy all of those values down into the nav mesh obstacle so it actually is the exact same. The health of the building is fine. The building preview is the small unit spawner preview. That's good. Okay, we'll keep going. The price, it's up to you to change. Aim at point. Well, we don't want to aim at the preview of the object because the pivot point is right at the floor, so everything will be aiming at the floor. We want to make a new empty game object called the aim at point. We've done this before. And then we just want to position it wherever you want your tanks to aim at. So it could be right at this top part, or it could be somewhere on the legs near the bottom. I'm going to say about a height of 1. And then we can go back and actually drag that in as the aim at point. The renderer, we now also need to have the renderer for this model. So let's open up the preview and drag in the radar to the renderer. If we go down to the final part, which is the spawner settings, we can say here the unit prefab we're spawning in is the prefabs, and then it's the small unit. And the max units we can queue up, let's say 10, and how far they move away is, let's say, 4 units. And then the spawn duration that it takes to make them is maybe 4 seconds. Okay, I think we should give this a go. Let's head back and we'll do a build. Well, I'll go to the main menu scene and then we'll do a build. So here we are with 2 players, and I'm going to try drag in the old building. It's using no new model, so it looks the same. But if I drag in the new building, you see here, we still get the red and green indicator that we're out of range or that we're now in range. And then we let go, we spawn it in. We can click on it to make some new units, and then here's one of our new units. And it's really fast and really responsive, and we can obviously select both of them and go send them down here to go and attack the other person's base at the bottom left. So if we say over here, let's spawn in some new buildings, start producing some units, and then over here I can, tell them to go and attack this thing. And I can tell them to then go and attack the base. And player 1 has won. And yeah, the game still works. So now it's time for your challenge, which is to have a go at doing the same thing and customize your units. So I'm not going to go over doing the exact same process another 2 times in the video, because it wouldn't really be any different. I'd just maybe use a different model for the unit and for the building. So have a go at customizing your units. If you need help remembering what to do, then just go back over the lecture, because it's the same process for each unit and building. Remember to make your units unique, and to have a go at tweaking all the things you can think of, like the size, speed, acceleration, health, the projectile. There's so many different things you can tweak, and like I said, if you forget or maybe you don't think you've covered everything, just go back over the video, because I pretty much changed everything I could think of. So yeah, give the video a pause and have a go at adding another couple of units, or as many as you want. Hello and welcome back. I hope you paused the video and gave that a go. While you were doing that, I had a go at adding one more type of unit, so let's have a look at how that turned out. So if I go back into the game and hit host, you'll see here that I can now spawn in the building we just made, and I added a new one in for medium units. So I've got small over here. Notice how the medium ones take a bit longer to produce, and when they spawn, they'll spawn in a different type of unit. And rather than being super fast like this, these are a bit slower. If you were to get both of them, obviously the small one's going to win in a race, whereas this medium one is actually more heavy hitting. I gave it a different projectile that deals more damage. So in case you had any problems while having a go on your own, just remember on the network manager, over here I've got small unit stuff and I've got medium unit stuff now, so they need to be in the registered prefabs. Make sure that on the player, you've got them in here, so resource generator, small unit spawner, medium unit spawner. Also make sure that they have different IDs. So if you look over here, the resource generator has an ID of 1 in my case. It doesn't matter what the IDs are as long as they're all different. So the resource generator has an ID of 1. The small unit spawner, I've given an ID of 2. And then the medium unit spawner, I gave an ID of 3. So you can go now, if you want, into the resource generator, and you can go fix the model in here so that it's not using the red cube. That's up to you. We're at the point now where it's just all about customization, so feel free to have a go on your own. I encourage you to have a go and not just copy what I'm doing. But for the base, because right now the base spawns in the ground, we need to make sure that if we go to scenes, scene menu, or scene map 01, if we look where the base is, so the bases spawn where all these spawn points are. The spawn points are currently at 0.5, but the ground's at 0.1. So let's just move all of these 4 spawn points up to a Y of 1, and then the base will spawn on the ground. And then if you want, you can go into the prefab for the unit base, and then you can of course change this cube to be using a different model if you'd like to do so. I mean, I'd recommend if you were to do this, in models we have the, which one is it? The refinery is actually a pretty good model for this. I think it's pretty big, so you can just use this as your base of operations. Then all we have to do is just make sure the minimap icon matches pretty well. So if we go like this and scale it along like so, so it roughly fits the base. And then I think this should be fine. Maybe just make it a bit longer. If we then hide that, go to the health bar, make sure the health bar is, it's just floating in the middle of nowhere. So let's move it down, maybe make it a bit wider. I think this will do. Then we can hide that and go back to the root. And all we really want to change on here is just the hitbox. So the hitbox can be, let's go into this view, just drag the side of the box so it covers the building. And then look at a different angle, or maybe this angle's better. Cover this. And I feel like it actually makes sense not to, oh no, this is good, like so. And what I'll do is I'll copy all of those settings into the nav mesh obstacle rather than the hitbox. And then for the nav mesh, I'll add a little bit on. So if we look on here, the size on the X, we actually want to make that a bit bigger in my opinion, because tanks should have to navigate around this bit here, but I don't think it should count as a hitbox, because otherwise this area here in the corner also counts as a hitbox, even though there's nothing there. So I feel like I'm happy with these settings now. The thing is, right now in the game, we'll be viewing it from this angle, and maybe you want to view it from this angle. So let's actually rotate the refinery on the Y by 180. And then we just need to make sure that everything else still kind of works. We might just have to shift some stuff. I think this works just fine. We can hide the minimap icon. The health bar is fine too. And just make sure that the hitbox, we want to shift the hitbox. So the center X, we just move it across to that side. And yep, that should be good. Now that I'm hosting in the editor, you see we've got the base here, and I can start spawning in my buildings and start producing some units. So yeah, that's it for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed. We now have added polish, tanks look a lot better, buildings look a lot better too. The game just looks and feels a lot better to play. All that's left now to do together is to make a lobby for the game, and then actually, if you want to, it's optional, to integrate with Steam so that you can play online with your friends through Steam. Great job on getting through to the end of the course and having a fully working RTS. I hope you're looking forward to the lobby section, and I'll see you there. Goodbye. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this lecture, we'll be creating the UI for the main menu and the lobby. We won't be doing any coding in this lecture, but we will be designing the landing page. And then if I was to turn this off and then turn on the enter address pop-up, so this is where you can put in the address rather than using the kind of built-in mirror UI. And then we can also use Steam instead, but we'll be getting to that later. And then if we turn this off, we also have the lobby UI here, where we display the players in our lobby, and then a button to leave the lobby. And if you're the host, there's a button here to start the game, like this. I hope you're looking forward to it. Let's get started. So this lecture is completely focused on the layout and design of the main menu and lobby. So rather than having a challenge in the middle where I get you to pause and do something, we'll have a continuous challenge instead, where I'd like you to design your UI however you want to do it. So make your UI unique, make it different to what I'm doing. Obviously, the functionality should be roughly the same, but the design and how it looks and feels to use can be completely different if you wanted. Use your own sprites and colors if you want to, and as an extra, if you want to go that far, you could also add more features to the main menu. So you can add a settings, and that could have volume and graphics, or whatever else you want to add. But we're going to be focused on the lobby. So let's head back and get started. The first thing we're going to want is an actual root object for the entire main menu. So we'll just call this the main menu display. Let's reset the transform, and we're going to add a canvas as a child. So add a UI canvas, and then we'll just leave this as the canvas. Scroll down to the canvas scaler and make it scale with screen size, and then whatever screen size you're working in. So for me, 1920 by 1080, and then match the height, and we'll leave the graphic raycaster on because we need to click on the UI. we can give our camera, if we jump over there and go to the environment skybox, let's change it to be solid color for the menu, and you can put the color as whatever you like. I'll just leave it on this blue. And then let's add a title. So if we go back to the canvas, right click, add UI, text mesh pro text. And to make the designing easier, we'll hit the 2D view, and then we'll scroll out, zoom all the way out, and then position it like this. So what we can do is we can grab our anchors, and I'll grab the top right one and put it at the top right, top left at the top left. And then the others, we can put it pretty much where you want. I'll just type in on the anchors 0.8 for the Y. And then we can say, if we put in 0 for all the left, top, right, and bottom, it'll then fill up that top 80%, or sorry, top 20%. And then for the text, I can type in, let's say, gamedev.tv RTS, and I'll go for bold, and I'll put the font size up to, let's say, 150. And then I'll scroll down a little bit and make it center aligned. So we're going to have different pages. We'll have the landing page, which says like host lobby or join a lobby. And then we'll have a page for the actual lobby itself. And then we'll have a pop-up for entering an IP address to connect to someone else's game. And then if you're connecting through Steam, which we'll add at the end, then you don't actually need to use that part, but we're still going to make it anyway. So we'll call this text the title text. And then on the same level, so as a child of the canvas, we'll make a UI panel, let's say. But we don't actually want an image for this, so let's remove the image. And we'll rename it to be the landing page. So the landing page simply has 2 buttons. So I'll add a UI button text mesh pro with a width of 400 and a height of 100. And then as for the color, I'll go for some kind of gray color. And then if I jump over to the text, I'll then type in host lobby and change this color to be white. I'll give the text a padding of 10 on all the corners, on top left, bottom right. And then if we go down here, and so by padding I mean like the margin, and then we will make the font size maybe 70. And then we'll make another button, so we'll duplicate this one, and then we'll put the pos y as -150. And let's change the text to say join lobby. And it makes sense to rename the buttons, so we can call this the, whoops, I turned on the eyes. Okay, this button can be called the host lobby button, and the other one can be called the join lobby button. If we fold these up, you can see here we now have the landing page, and we can turn that on and off, and that's just really the buttons for the hosting and joining. If we turn that off for now and make another panel on the canvas, so UI, make a new panel, and then this one can be called the like enter IP address, or enter address, we'll just call it. Then what I'll do is I'll change the sprite to be none, and the color I'll go for some, well, I'll go for black and then turn the transparency up a little bit so it's see-through but not completely see-through. Then let's right click on here and add another UI image, and we'll call this the enter address panel. And then what we can do is we can give that a width of 900 and a height of 500 and a position of maybe -100. And then I can make this color very dark, so darker than the background but not completely black, so it's like this. So then on here, the first thing we can add is some more text, and I'll call this the enter address text. And what we'll do for this is with the anchors, we'll go to the top corners like so, and then we'll go up to, let's say, 0.6 on the Y, and I'll give a 20 around the edges, except on the bottom I'll do 10 because we're going to have another bit beneath this and that'll have a 10 as well, so this spacing is actually going to be 20. As for the text, we can just call it, well, put the text as enter address and then make it center lined, make the font size a bit bigger, maybe 70, and I think that'll do. Then we're going to have a input field to actually enter the IP, and then a button to actually join once we've entered the IP. So on this panel, let's add a UI input text, so input field text mesh pro, and then we want to drag these anchors so the top ones snap to the bottom ones of the enter address thing, so they line up there. And then the bottom, we can put it to whatever we want. I'm going to go for 0.3, and I'm going to add 20 on the left, 10 on the top, so that it, you know, goes with the 10 on the bottom of the other one, which leaves a gap of 20, and then 20 there, and then 10 on the bottom again. I'm going to make this gray like this, and then go to the child where we've got the text area, we've got a placeholder and the text itself. Let's select both those pieces of text, and what I'll do is I'll change the font size to be, let's say, 70. I'll change it to be left aligned and then middle on height. We'll change the color to be white, and then we can see it like this. We can then go back to the input field and just type in the default, which will be localhost, and then that'll just be filled in by default for the player. Let's rename it to be the address input. And then we can add one more thing here, so we can add a button, text mesh for a button, where we want the anchors to be at the very bottom, and then snap to the thing above it, like so. So it's these values over here. And then we just pass in, so on the left will be 20, the top will be 10, and then the right and the bottom will also be 20. For the button text, we can go over there and add 10 on each side. We'll call it, we'll just say join, and we'll put the color to be white and the size to be 70. And if we go back to the button, we need to make it actually visible, so we'll make that gray. And we could use the color picker and go for the same gray we used earlier. We can rename that to the join button. And then we also want a close button to get rid of this window in case we don't want to do it anymore. So to make the close button, we want to right click on here, add a new UI button. And then on the anchors, there's a preset for this. Just click the top right one here. And then what we can do is we can input the value of, let's say, 0, 0, and then a width and height of 50, 50. Because it's a close button, I think we should make the color some kind of red. We can always tweak that. And then if we go to the text itself, we'll just put in a capital X, and we'll put in a font size of, let's say, 50. Center align it, make the text white, and then if we have a quick look back, it looks like this. And we can call this the close button, and we're done with this panel. So now we can turn this off, and we can make the final panel. So if we right click, a new UI panel, and we can call this the lobby parent. And this doesn't actually need any UI on it, so we can remove the image and the renderer, just so we're left with a rect transform. And this will actually stay on, because it'll have some code on here that needs callback, so we can't disable it. But this will have a child for the visuals, so a new UI panel. And we'll call this the lobby UI. The lobby UI itself doesn't need any image or renderer, it's just going to hold child elements. So we're going to need something to display all the players in the lobby, and then a button to leave and a button to start the game if you're the host. So what I'll do is I'll make a new UI image, and we'll call this image the player background. And then what we can do is we can give it a width of 500, a position, so let's put the anchor to the left. So if we click on the anchor box and click on the left one, we'll put the pos to be maybe 50, but currently our pivot point's in the center, so it's actually going to go kind of into the side of the screen. So if we just change this pivot to be at 0 on the X, and then now we put 50 back in there, we now have an actual gap of 50 on the edge, and we can put the pos Y to be 225. Let's make this gray again. We'll just go for roughly like this. And then for a child, we want to actually display the name of this player. So if I make a new UI text mesh pro, and then for the anchors, we want to click here and hold Alt, click at the bottom right, and then it will, if we go back to the scene view, snap to all the four corners. Let's add, let's say, 10 around all the edges. And then for the text itself, the default text should be like waiting for player, ... And because players' names can vary in length, we should use auto size in case they have a really long name. And we can set the max to something like 40. And let's say left aligned on the middle. We can call this text the player name text. And then with this object we have, we can actually make 3 more copies of it, and then we can just position them differently. So this is 225, so we'll make the second one 75, then the third one minus 75, and then the final one minus 225. All we need now are 2 more buttons. So let's right click UI button. And for this first one, it's going to be the start game button we'll put at the bottom middle. So I'll click the anchors and hit the bottom middle. And I'll hold Alt when I click it. So it'll actually move it down here. And then the anchors, we want the Y anchor to be 0 on the Y. And this allows us to then just, whatever we put pos Y is how far away it is from the bottom of the screen. So let's say 50. We can then give a width of 400 and a height of 100. This button can be some kind of light green, something like this. And then we want to change the text, so let's go to the text. We'll make the text say start game. We'll give it a padding of, let's say, 10 around all the edges. And then for the font size, I can put it to be like 70, what we've been using. And we'll make the font color white. And this will be off for all players apart from the host. So what we should say here is we should call this the start game button. And we turn that off. And then we want a leave lobby button at the bottom right, which is for everyone. So we can turn that back on. And then we can change the anchors. So if we go to the scene, if we look here, we want these anchors to just be the same, but in the bottom right of the screen. And then we can change the pos X to be -50. And then for the pivot on the X, we'll change it to be 1. And then if we put -50 on the X here, we now get 50 on the side and 50 on the bottom. This is leaving, so we'll put it as red. We'll go for maybe, this is more pink. We'll go for, let's say this red. And change the text to say leave lobby. And then because that's longer, we should change the font size. So we can put this down to, let's just say 60 will do. If we change the button name now to be the leave lobby button, we've now actually created the entire UI. So the way the game boots up is with this off, so the lobby UI will be off, and the landing page will be on. So it's like this. Now none of our UI actually works right now, it's all just there, it all exists. We're ready to go and start coding in the next lecture, so I hope you're looking forward to that, and I'll see you there. Goodbye. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this lecture, we'll be writing the logic so that when we hit host, it actually will host a lobby. And then when I hit join, it asks for my IP. I'm going to go for localhost and hit join. And then once I join, it puts me in the lobby. You see 2 players here, so it did actually join. We just need to, after this, then write some logic to update the UI to say the players who are in the lobby and give the host a start button to actually start the game. I hope you're looking forward to it. Let's get started. So now we need to start writing the logic for the UI so these buttons actually do something. So what we'll do is we'll head over to our scripts folder, into menus, and we'll make a new script called the main menu script. So main menu, and open that up in VS Code. So in here, we'll get rid of the boilerplate, and we'll add reference to the landing page panel so that we can turn it on and off in code. So we'll say serialize field, private game object for the landing page panel. Equals null. And then down here we'll make a method, a public void that we can call from the button click. So public void host lobby. And what we'll do here is when we click to host, we'll turn off the landing page. So landing page panel dot set active false. And then we want to call start host. So in the network manager, there's a start host method. So what we can do here is we can say network manager. So network manager dot, and we have to import mirror here, dot singleton dot, and then start host. And that's it in this script for now. So we'll head back over to Unity, and we want to stick this on the root of the main menu. So main menu. The landing page panel is this, so we'll drag that in. And we've got 2 buttons in here, the host and the join. So the host button, on click, we'll click add, drag in the main menu, and we'll call the function we just made host lobby. And then for the join button, we actually want to just turn on this enter address page. So plus enter address, game object, set active, true. And now that we're making the UI, we don't actually need the HUD that Mirror gives us. So if we go to our network manager, you can actually just remove the network manager HUD and apply that to the prefab. So if we were to hit play now, what should happen is we hit host, and when we host, it actually does close that bit of UI, but then it takes us to the game and it starts. And that's because we've put over here on the network manager to go to the map when we are online, and we don't actually want to do that. So let's just set the online scene to be none. So now if we hit play and then hit host, we don't go to the other scene, so that's good, but we do spawn in our base, which isn't good. And that's because we wrote code in the network manager to say when we add this player to the server, spawn in their base over the network. And we don't really want to do that. That was just temporary. Now we only want to spawn it in when the game really starts. So we want to take this code out of here. We'll just delete this for now. And then we'll end up putting it in here when we move to the map scene. But we won't do this just yet. Let's head back into Unity. And if we were to hit play and hit join lobby, we now get this pop-up where we can enter the address and we can hit join, which currently doesn't do anything. And same with the close button, it doesn't do anything. So let's make a script for the IP address panel. So we'll call this, if we make a new C# script, we'll call this the join lobby menu. But I didn't mean to put it in the networking folder. So let's move that into the menus folder and give it a second and then open it up. So we're going to need reference to the landing page. So we'll say here, serialize field, private game object, the landing page panel. We then also want to be able to read the input field. So private TMP input field. So TMP underscore input field. And we'll call it address input. Then I need to import Text Mesh Pro. And then finally, we need reference to the button, because when they click it, we want to disable it. So button, we'll call this the join button. And make sure it uses the right class, button, from unityengine.ui. So let's make a method for hitting the join button. So public void join. And what the join button does is it will read the address from that input text. So string address equals the address input dot text. And then we want to tell Mirror to try and connect to that address. So we'll say network manager dot, and then let's import Mirror. Network manager dot singleton dot network address. So the network address is now the address we just got from the text input. And then the next line is network manager, network manager dot singleton dot start client. And when we start to join, we want to also disable the button. So the join button dot interactable equals false. And now at this point, we've got two other things that can happen. So let's make two methods for this. We can either handle client connected, or the client may fail to join because the server's full, the server kicks them, there is no server with the IP. There's plenty of reasons why it can fail. So private void handle client disconnected. Now when the client successfully connects, we want to make the join button interactable again, and that's so that if they go back to the home page and then try and join again, the button should be clickable. And we do that regardless, so we do that in both cases. Whoops, let's copy paste that. Make the join button clickable. But in the case that we do successfully join, we want to turn off this game object, so gameObject.setActive false, and we want to turn off the landing page panel as well. Landing page panel.setActive false. And then the lobby itself will turn itself on when that happens, so we don't have to worry about turning anything else on in here. But we do need to actually call these two methods. The join will be called by a button, and these two will be called by events. So we need the network manager to tell us when these two things happen. So let's go over here to the network manager, and at the top, we'll make two events. Public static event action, and we'll call the first one client on connected. And another one. Let's import system so it doesn't keep complaining. Client on disconnected. And the reason why I'm not calling it on client, I'm calling it client on, is because that already exists in the network manager. If we override on client connected or on client connect, I don't want to be confused with that naming. That's why I've gone for the other way around in here. So if we override here, override on client connect and override on client disconnect, we just want to say, as well as doing those things, also raise our own events. So client on connected, question mark, dot invoke, and then the same for the other one. Not instead of the base, we want to do it alongside it. So we now can raise an event here, and if we close the network manager and head over to the join lobby script now, we can actually subscribe to that and call these two methods based on when those two things happen. So if I go up, we'll make an onEnable, so private void on enable, called by Unity, and private void on disable. And then we just want to say RTS network manager dot client on connected plus equals handle client connected, RTS network manager dot client on disconnected plus equals handle client disconnected. And then we just need to unsubscribe in the other method, so change the pluses to minuses. So now we can head back over. We can then go over to the enter address panel, and we can add on the join lobby menu script. And we want to reference the landing page. We want to reference the address input, which is a child over here, address input, and reference the join button, which is over here. The join button should call the join lobby menu dot join, and then the close button should do two things. It should first of all turn off the the enter address panel. We want to turn that off, so game.Object.setActive false. And then we also want to turn on the button again, the join button, in case it's off. So for example, if we're trying to connect and then we hit the close button, we don't want it to break. So button.interactable true. Then we need one final script, which is to handle the lobby, and we're going to have the lobby turn on when we successfully connect to a server, and then we'll make the leave button work too. And then in the next lecture, we can actually handle displaying the players and starting the game. So let's make one more script called the lobby menu, and we'll open that one up. So in here, we need reference to the lobby UI to be able to turn it on. So private game object, or lobby UI. And then as for the methods, we want to say when this script is on and off, we want to subscribe and unsubscribe from the client connecting. So just like how in here, we do it too. We say when the client connects, turn this off. We want to say in the lobby, when the client connects, turn it on. And for subscribing and unsubscribing, we can use either start and on destroy or on enable, on disable. It really doesn't matter. So let's go with private void start and private void on destroy. And we want to say here, RTS network manager. So when a client connects, or as a client when you connect, we want to say handle client, what did we call it in the other one? Handle client connected. And then we'll unsubscribe in on destroy. And then we'll make the method, whoops, private void handle client connected. And all we want to do here is just turn the lobby UI on. And then the final thing for this lecture is to make the leave lobby work. And it's not just a case of turning off some UI. We need to also actually leave the lobby. So what we'll do here is we'll say public void leave lobby. But this is based on whether you're a host or a client. We want to do two different things. So if network server using mirror .active. So if you're running as a server and as a client, network client connected, so is connected, then it means you're a host. So we'll say network manager .instance, or singleton even, .stop host. So stop hosting if you're a host, else it means you have to be a client. So we'll say network manager .singleton .stop client. And then we can also say here scene manager .load scene 0, which will just reload the main menu scene once you leave a lobby, so you're back on the main menu. You already are on the main menu here, but it saves us having to turn off and turn on various bits of UI. It's nice to have a full reload here. You don't actually have to, but it's up to you. And now that we've done this, we should be able to go and plug it all in inside Unity. So I'll say over here on the lobby parent, we'll add on the lobby menu. Needs reference to the lobby UI, which is its child. And then the leave lobby button, on click, we want to call lobby parents, lobby menu, dot leave lobby. So now it should all work. So I'll give it a build and see what happens. So now I've got to build, and if I hit host on either of these, so let's say host here, it immediately makes a lobby and opens it up. We've not written the code to fill in the names yet, but that's fine. And then if I go over to the editor and join as a client, so hit play, then join, hit join, I then join and connect, and you can tell it's worked because both the player objects are here, so it is connected and we're in the lobby. And all we need to do next is show the names and make the host be able to hit start for the game. So yeah, that's it for this lecture. We now have the lobby working, or at least to some extent, we now have the main menu working and you can join the lobby. We just need a way to start the game and give you a little bit more information on the UI. That's it for now, so I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Hello everyone and welcome. In this lecture, we'll be actually making it so that I can host a lobby, have a start game button, which doesn't let me start if there's only me in the lobby. And then when I hit join, we can actually join as a second player. They don't get the button because they're not allowed to start. And then now that there's at least 2 players, I can hit start game. And when the game starts, there is a slight problem because some of the code we wrote a while ago, I kept saying when we make the lobby, we won't need this anymore. And now that we do have the lobby, it's broken it. So in the next lecture after this one, we'll then go through and clean all that up, but it should be very easy to do so. And it'll make a lot of these scripts a lot nicer. I hope you're looking forward to it. Let's get started. So now that we've removed the functionality to start the game, we need to add it back. And the person who can start the game is going to be the host, but you could technically make it any of the clients. You just have to assign one of them to be like the party owner. In our case, we'll make it be the host, but it could be anyone. And then for that player, we'll turn on the start game button. And then when they click it, we'll check on the server, is this person the host? And if they are, then we can start the game. So we need to do a few different things. And the first thing is to actually add a list of players. And everyone needs to know this list of players because otherwise, when we have the UI, we won't be able to display all the other names of the players in our game. So it'd be really useful if not in the player script, but in the network manager, we have a private list of players. It will actually need to be a public list because we need to read it elsewhere. So let's make a public list of type RTS player. We can call this players. And we can also just make it a getter, so we can't set it elsewhere. We can only get it, which is what we want to do. And then we'll make a new list of players. So we store that in here. And we need to make sure that if we're the host, we don't accidentally add every player twice because we're the server and the client. So the first thing we need to do is go to where we connect. We also need to store, are we in game or not? Because players shouldn't be able to connect during the game now. So we should also, while we're here, make a private bool is game in progress. False by default. And we also have a mix of server and client code in here now. So we should make regions. So make a server region and a client region. And let's move this client stuff into here. And then move both of these server callbacks into here. So there's a callback on the server. If we override on server connect, it's called on the server whenever a client connects, and we can tell it to, for example, kick the player. So we can say con.disconnect, which will kick them, but we should say before that if the game is not in progress. So if not is game in progress, then return. So we only kick them if the game is in progress. In server add player, we can actually add them to that list. So we can say players, the list we just made. So, oh wait, we should call that players. Okay. Players.add this new player. And then we can also override on server disconnect. Override on server disconnect. And we can say when the server disconnects someone, let's grab their player. So con.getComponent, oh sorry, identity.getComponent. Grab their RTS player. So that's RTS player equals that. And then we can say remove them from the list. So players.remove that player. we can then override another method on stop server. So we can say what happens when we stop running the server, and that also counts for host. Well, we want to say, let's clear the players list and set is in progress, is game in progress, to false, so we can start a new game. And then we need an actual start game method in here. We don't currently have that. So let's say public void start game. And what we'll do is we'll say, well, if the players.count is less than 2, then return. We can't start with less than 2 players. But if we've got 2 or more, then we can start. So we'll say, is game in progress? True. No one else can connect now. And then to change scene to actually start the game, we need to do that here. So we can say server change scene and pass in the name of our scene, which in our case is, I think it's scene underscore map underscore 01. So scene underscore map underscore 01. But I will go and check. Yep, so that is the name of our scene. So now we can go down to where we change scenes, and it says when we go to a map scene, we currently just spawn in the game over handler. We also want to now spawn in all the player bases. So we can say for each RTS player, player in players, so loop over all the players, and for each one we'll spawn in their base. So we'll say instantiate base prefab, or whatever we called it. We called it the unit spawner prefab, yeah. So it's not actually a unit spawner anymore, but that's the name. So we should probably update the name. So we'll call this the unit base prefab. Instantiate the unit base prefab. And where do we want to spawn it in? Well, we have got those start positions in the scene, so we can actually use those. We can say get start position dot position. And then the rotation, we just want to leave it at the default rotation, which is quaternion dot identity. We then want to spawn them in over the network. So game object base instance equals this. And it's a bit long, so let's put it onto new line. And then object. We then want to spawn it in over the network. So network server dot spawn the base instance, and the person who owns it is this player, and then their connection to client. So we're on the server here, so it's the connection to that client. That's who owns it. And if we go down to the client logic, we want to add one more thing. We want to override on stop client. So when a client stops, we should also clear the players list. And currently, we only add to it on the server. So we need to now add a way to add to it on the clients. Let's go to the RTS player. So if we go down to onStart client, wherever an object starts existing on the client, we currently don't actually use onStart client, so let's start using that. Override on start client. We want to do the same thing where we say, well, if it's running as a server as well, then don't do this, and that stops us from adding the players twice for the host. And then all we want to do here is just say network manager dot singleton, but we need it as an RTS network manager, so we can cast it by saying RTS network manager and then wrapping it around in brackets. And then on this, we can then call .players.add this. So whenever a client starts and we're not the host, if we're just another client, we can then add to our list. So then to remove, we want to take this and we want to put it down here, change it to be remove. But we want it to happen even for things that we don't have authority over. So what we want to do here is change this if. We just make a new if beneath this, if not has authority, return. And then we can remove that from the first one. So then it stops at this point if we're the server. If we're not the server, we do this for everyone. And then if we don't have authority, then we don't do these. But if we do, then we do. So now everyone stores a list of all the players, which I said is used for displaying their names in the UI. And the one other thing this player script needs to do is to store whether we are the party owner. So if we go up to the top, we currently store some things. And one other thing we should store here is a private bool is party owner, which is false by default. And then it should also be a sync var, because the server sets it and everyone else can see it. And then we also need a hook for when it's changed. So we'll make a method called, now this is only called on the person who has authority. So instead of calling it client handle, we'll call it authority handle. and then we'll call it party owner state updated. We then want a getter for this, so let's just stick it over here. Public bool is, get is party owner. Return is party owner. So we can now read that. We then need a way to set it on the server. So if we go down to the other setters, we can then here make a server method to set who the party owner is. So public void set party owner. And we take in a bool for whether it's true or false, so state. And we'll say is party owner equals state. We then go down to the commands, and we need a command to actually try and start the game so the clients can tell the server, I want to start a game. So we'll say command public void cmd start game. And all we check is when they try and start the game, we say, well, if they're not the party owner, then just return, because they're not allowed to start the game. Otherwise, we want to then tell the network manager to try and start the game. So we'll do the RTS network manager .singleton .start game. Then we can go down to where all our other authority events are, and we can make a new one. Private void authority, and this is the party owner state updated, and it uses a bool old state and a bool new state. This also allows you to actually change who the party owner is during the lobby. So we could add, if we wanted to, a button to transfer ownership, and then when we change it, this would get triggered, and you can update the UI accordingly. And keep in mind, right now this would be triggered for everyone, so we need to say, if not has authority, then return. But if you do, we want to raise an event that the UI can listen into to turn on and off the button. So we'll make an event called authority on party owner state updated. And we want to invoke it with the new state. And what we can do is we can then fly up to the top and we can make a new event for this. So just like how we have this client resources updated, we also want a public static event action, and this will pass in a bool, which will be true or false based on whether you are or aren't the party owner. And then the name is this, authority on party owner state updated. We now need to set someone to be the party owner. So in the network manager, when we add a player, we can then, for example, after setting the color, we can say player.setPartyOwner, true or false. Well, I think we should set it to be true if there is only one player. Because if we add the player and there's only one, it means they're the only person in the lobby, so they are obviously the owner. So if players.count is equal to 1. If it's not, then it'll be false. So now we actually do set an owner. We set a party owner to whoever's there first, and that will then sync. And when it syncs, it raises an event over here. And all we need now is the UI to do something when that event's triggered. So if we go to the lobby menu, we already have one event being subscribed to. So let's add another one, RTS player dot authority on party owner stay updated. I know it's a long name, but it's very descriptive. Plus equals, and then we can say authority handle party owner state updated. And then we unsubscribe over here. And then we make the method. So remember, this method needs to take in a bool. So we'll do it here. We'll say private void this takes in a bool, and then it can just be the state. And we just turn on and off the button based on whether this state is true or false. So we can say we need reference to the button. So add reference to serialize field private game object, or actually reference to the button. Button, which is from unityengine.ui. We'll call it the start game button. And then we want to make it be on if this is true and off if this is false. So we can actually just say start game button dot game object dot set active state. So it'll turn it on and off based on the state. So that was quite a bit of stuff. I'll now go over what we did so you can catch up and also fully understand stuff in case I went a little too quick. We did have a lot to do there. So in the network manager, we now store a list of all players and whether the game is in progress or not. And if the game is in progress, then we kick them. And then we say over here, when we disconnect a player, we remove them from our players list. When the server stops, we empty the list and set the game to not be in progress. When we start the game, or try to start, we say, well, make sure there are at least 2 players, and then set it to be true and go to the first level of the map. And then when a player is added, the server then will check if they're the first player, give them ownership. If not, don't. And when we change to a map scene, so a gameplay scene, we then spawn in their bases for them then, rather than just when they connect to the server. And then in the client side, we just clear the list when you stop running the game, basically. And then in the RTS player, we now store, up at the top, we store whether they are the party owner, and then if they are, or when it changes, so we raise an event down here, authority on party owner stay updated, and then that will update the UI button accordingly to turn it on or off. The final thing is now that in here we need a function to start the game from the button click, and then we're done. So public void start game, and all it's going to do is say get my client connection, and then if you get the identity from that, it's the RTS player, or the game object with the RTS player script on, in which case we can get RTS player, and then we can just call cmd start game on that. So now if we head back into Unity, there's a couple things to set up. It won't take very long. We just need to go to the lobby parent, drag in the button reference, go to the button, and add an actual method call. So drag in the lobby parent, call lobby menu.startGame. And then on the network manager, we need to add a reference to the unit base prefab. So let's go assets, prefabs, and then we want to drag in the unit base. Let's drag that in. And now if I apply that and go file, build and run, I'll see you in a second. So now that I have the build done, I can hit host and see a start game button. But if I click it, nothing happens because there's only me in the lobby. Then if I open up the built client and I join, I actually do join and I don't see a button because I'm not the owner. And then if I now hit start, it will start, except the game is kind of bugged. It doesn't work properly, and that's because a lot of the different scripts we wrote that needed reference to our player had that awkward workaround for actually getting reference. And that doesn't work anymore now that we have the lobby. So that's actually a good thing. It means we don't need the awkward workaround, but it's also a bad thing because now it's all broken. So we can have some fun in the next lecture fixing all that stuff, but that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this lecture, we'll be improving the lobby so that when we hit host, and you see here, we have player 1, and then if I was to go to my build and join, we now see we have player 2, and we see it on both. And then if player 2 was to leave, then it goes back to saying waiting for player, I can join again, everything works fine. And when there's only one player in the lobby, the button gets disabled for the host, but as soon as there are 2, it gets enabled. And if I click, the game starts, we get no errors in the console, everything is working fine, and I can go ahead and play the game. With all that said, let's get started. So let's get started fixing those bugs from last time. So if we open up VS Code, if you remember, the problem we had was that in these places where we have an update loop, and then we say, if the player's null, then try and get the player. And that was because when we started the game, it started immediately the second we joined, so we'd have a race condition where this line would get ran before our connection has this player. And now we know for sure that when the game starts, our players already exist because they exist in the lobby, then they go into the game. So we don't actually need it in update anymore, we can move it out of here into the start method. So for example, if I get rid of the if statement, and then take the rest of the code, just the setting the player part, and I go up to the start method, and I should be able to just place it in here, doesn't matter where in here really, just put it in the start method, it'll try and get it once, and it should successfully get it right at the start, and then this one's fixed. The only problem is now we've actually caused one other problem, which is because we change scene from the lobby to the actual game itself, normally objects in Unity get destroyed when you change scene, and we need these player objects not to. So if we go over to our RTS player script, which is in networking RTS player, we need on the server side to call don't destroy and load, and also on the client side too. So if we go to on start server, which is up here, then in here we should be able to just say don't destroy and load. So don't destroy unload, and then pass in this game object. And then we also need to do it on the client side. So if we put a semicolon there, and then go down to the client side on start client, and all we should do is just do it here. So don't destroy on load, game object. So now if I was to host and then join and hit play, we get 2 errors, and these errors aren't actually to do with the thing we were just messing with. It's because on our base objects, we haven't actually assigned the color renderers, so that's just something to quickly go in and fix in the prefab, and that's my own fault that I just rushed it in one of the lectures. So if we go and quickly fix that, apart from that, the rest of it does still work. We can still make units and do everything else. Let's go into prefabs, go down to the unit base, and if we look for the color setter, you see here we're missing a renderer. So if I just drag in the refinery, we'll be good to go. And if we look back over at the code we just did, which was moving out of the update into the start and getting rid of the null check, so we're not doing it every single frame, I'd like you to go do that for the other instances where we do this, and I think it's only in maybe 2 or 3 other places. So your challenge for this lecture is to fix the other scripts. So go through the other places where we get reference to the player in the update loop, take out that line where we get the player reference, and you can then get rid of the null check, and then move it into the start method of its respective script. So have a go, pause the video, and try and find those places and fix them. Okay, welcome back. Hope you paused and gave that a go. If we head back over here, I can go to the little magnifying glass search and type in this line here. So not the whole line necessarily, just like identity.getComponent RTS player. And then we get all the instances where we do it, and we can just go through and check, okay, well, this one's in start, that's fine. This one's in start server, command spawn unit, start game, on server disconnect, on server player, on start server. So here we go in the resources display, we've got it in update. So we just want to go put this in start. So we can say here, private void start. Oops. And then we want to just have this player line to grab reference. And then we can call these 2 lines here, which were getting called the first time we got reference to the player. And then we can just remove the update method. So on the resources display, we grab the player, we update it to the default value, whatever that is, and then we subscribe for any changes. There's then one more if we go down here. We also do it in the unit selection handler. And we already have a start method, so we should be able to just cut and paste. And maybe I'll put it with the other bit before the event. It doesn't matter. And then in the update, I can remove this, and we're done. So that's it for fixing the scripts, but we've got one other thing to do this lecture, which is to actually have the names be updated in the lobby. So we actually need somewhere to store the player's name to be able to display it in the UI. So if we go to our RTS player script and scroll up to the top, we need a sync var where the server can set our name and then everyone else can have it synced to them. So let's make a sync var, and it's going to be a string, private string, display name. And then what we'll do is we'll make this a hook method. So add a hook. And what should we call the method? Well, it should be client handle display name updated. We then need a way to be able to read the display name. So if we go over here to where we have all the getters, let's just add a new one at the top. It doesn't matter where we add it really. Make a public string get display name, which returns the display name. We then would need a way for the server to set it. So if we go down to where we have the server setters, we'll then make a new one. Public void set display name, which requires a string display name. And then we'll say this dot display name equals the display name being passed in the method. And then right down at the bottom in the client side, we need to make a method for this, or a hook method for this. So private void client handle display name updated. It takes in a string old display name and a string new display name. And so on the client side in the UI for the lobby, we need to display people's names when they get updated. But we also need to update everything when someone leaves. So rather than just having an event here, instead of client on resources updated, we just want a client on updated when this player gets updated, and so we can update them in the lobby. So we'll call it client on info updated. And this is in case we have any other info with them, like their player color. If they have like a team color or something, they can choose in the lobby. So client on info updated dot invoke. But as well as raising it whenever someone's name updates, we also need to raise it when someone disconnects. So we have onStop client here. So let's raise it when a client stops existing, when someone disconnects. We can raise that too. Now we just need to jump up to the top and make a new event for this. So we'll do it next to the resources updated. So it's a public static event action, and it's no parameters, and we call it clients on info updated. And it actually makes more sense to be put next to the other static event for the lobby. So there we go. And now we actually need to set their name. So if we go to the network manager, what we'll do for now is we'll just set their name to be player 1, player 2, player 3. And then you can add in a way to have like a name text input where you set it. Or what we will be doing in the next lecture, the final one, is going to be grabbing their name from Steam. So right here, under where we add them to the players list, we can say player.setDisplayName, pass in their name. Well, I'm going to go with player, and then just the number of players in that list. So players.count. So now we set their name, we raise events when it updates and when someone leaves. We now just need to hook into that and actually use it in the user interface. So if we jump over to the lobby menu, want to go to where we've got the events, and we want to subscribe to one more event, which is rtsplayer.client on info updated. We'll make a method client handle info updated. And as usual, we'll unsubscribe in the stop or in the onDestroy. And then the method itself, we can do wherever we like. We could do it just right beneath, like here. Throat void client handle info updated. So we need a list of players to know who there is to display. So we need a list of RTS players, and we can get that from the network manager. So let's do RTS network manager.singleton, and then from here we've got the .players list. So we want to, let's say there's 2 players, we want to loop for 2 times if there's 2 players, and set the first and second text element to be their names. And then for the remaining ones, we want it just to say waiting for player. So let's do a loop. So for int I, so we'll do for int I is less than players.count, I++. And we actually need the UI to update. So at the top, we can add an array of TMP text elements. So serialized field, private TMP text array. And we'll call this the player name texts, and we're going to set it equal to, I don't know, a new array of size 4, because there's going to be 4 in our game, and we need this to be using Text Mesh Pro. Then if we go back down to here, we need to actually say now, okay, player name texts I dot text, and we want to set it equal to be their name. So we'll say players I dot, and we made a get display name method. So if we have, like I said, 3 or 2 players, it'll go 3 or 2 times, and then there'll still be the players that are left. So let's imagine we had 4 people in the lobby, and someone leaves, now it's down to 3. So we need to update the 4th element to just say waiting for player. So we can do another for I loop, but where I is equal to, not 0, but players.count. So we're going to start from there instead of starting from 0. And while it's less than, the player name texts dot length, I++. And then for all of those, we want to set it to be waiting for player. So player name texts I.text equals, and then just a string waiting for player ... And then what we can do to help the host know when they can start, we can actually disable the button if there aren't enough players. So we can say start game button.interactable equals, so that's a bool to say whether you can click the button or not. And we just set it equal to players.count being greater than 1. So if there's more than 1 player, so we could say here greater than or equal to 2. So if there's at least 2 players, then they can start. So yeah, if we go back to the lobby UI, we need to set those references. So if we give it a second, open it all up, go to the lobby, we've got these backgrounds, each with their own text element. So what we can do here is we go to the lobby, we can lock it and open this array up. So you see we've got the array of 4 elements. I'm actually going to set it to be 0, and I'm going to control click on each text element. So you see here I've got the 4 player name texts, and if I was to drag that in now to the player name text list, it actually populates it like this. So let's see if it all works. We can shrink this back a bit, shrink this back, and I'm going to go ahead and build. I've got the build, so if we hit host, we see now player 1 and the button is disabled. And if I join over here, as soon as I join, player 2 updates here and I see both players on my screen. And if I was to leave, it then updates and says waiting for player, and I can join again, player 2, and then we can hit start game and play the game. So yeah, that's it for this lecture. We now have the fully working lobby where we can see everyone's name. We can start if we're the host and only if there's enough players. And then, yeah, we start the game and everything works. I can now just go play like usual. So yeah, that's it for this lecture. We now have the working lobby, so we can go into the lobby, we can wait, and then when the host is ready and there's enough players, we can start. We also display everyone's names. Currently, we just set their names to be however many players there are, but we will, in the next lecture, change it to be using their Steam name if you have Steam enabled. So that's it for now, and I'll see you there. Goodbye. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this lecture, we'll be making our game joinable through Steam, so you can host, have your friend go onto their friends list on Steam, right-click on new join, and they'll join your lobby through Steam without needing to port forward or mess with any router firewall settings. Hope you're looking forward to it. Let's get started. So now we want to allow our friends on Steam to right-click on our names and join us when we've got a lobby. And to do that, we're going to be downloading this thing called steamworks.net that allows us to write some C# code to interact with Steam. And that's going to be using the latest release, which means we need to update our mirror if you haven't already. So I know my version's a bit out of date as of making this video. From when I started the course, a few new versions had come out. So if I go Window, Package Manager, and when it's loaded, I'll head over to the assets. So it seems like I already have the latest version installed, but I know for a fact I don't have it in this project. I've used it in a separate project. So we need to import it. But first, I'm going to do a clean import. So if I go to my project here and I'm going to delete the mirror folder, which doesn't have any code we've written, it's just the mirror package. And then we'll hit import. And when we import now, it should say everything is brand new. It just says new all the way down. We'll hit import. Now that it's imported, if I go back into the scene and go to the network manager, you'll see here that if you're using the telepathy transport, it's actually been deprecated now, which doesn't mean we have to go back and change anything. We just need to remove this and add a component, KCP transport, and that's all you have to do for that. Nothing else. If I apply this to the prefab now and hit play, we should be able to hit host and make a lobby. It should all work still. So if I hit host lobby, it makes us a lobby, spawns in the player, and it seems to be working just fine. So what actually will we be doing with Steam here? So Steam won't actually be hosting our game. We are still hosting the game. But instead of going into your router settings and changing all your firewall stuff, we'll actually be using Steam as a relay. And what I mean by that is, rather than the other clients connecting directly to your router, they'll be connecting to Steam, and you'll be connecting to Steam. So Steam relays the information between everyone for all your, synced data and all your commands and RPCs. It's all done through Steam. So you don't need to mess with your firewall settings or port forwarding or any of that. That's why we're using Steam for this. Just keep in mind that we're developing here and testing the app. So if you actually release a commercial product to follow the terms of service, you do have to publish your game on Steam and get your own app ID. For what we're doing, we'll be using a test ID, so we don't have to worry if we're just, messing around, playing with friends and testing and learning. It's for development. But for commercial products, you do need to go a step further. So if we head over to the Mirror website, we see here they support multiple different transports, and we'll be using Steam, using steamworks.net. So if we click on that, it tells you here, you can get this mirror using steamworks.net wrapper. You can get the latest release here with the latest version of Steamworks included. So we're going to click here. It's going to take us to GitHub, and then over here is the latest release. Make sure you're on Mirror 26, which is what I've just installed. And then we're going to click on the Unity package. Once it's downloaded, drag it into Unity, and then we'll get this pop-up here, which tells us, do you want to import all this stuff? Yes, we do. Hit import. Now that that's done, if we head over to the network manager, you'll see here that our transport is the KCP transport, but we want to use Steamworks. So if you ever want to swap between the two, just turn off one of them, add on the other, which in our case is Fizzy Steamworks, and then drag in the Fizzy Steamworks to the transport, so we'll use this one instead. And it also added for us the Steam Manager, which means that when you boot up the game, it'll try and connect to Steam, and this is how you actually do interact with Steam to, for example, grab your name off Steam, or try and do a party to connect to your friends. We'll apply that to a prefab, and then we want to open up our lobby menu script. So if we look over here on the main menu, we have this main menu script, So we want to open that up in Visual Studio Code. So I'll just warn you now that this coding is going to be relatively complex, and I'm not going to spend too long dwelling on everything. We're only going to be using a very small part of the Steamworks API, so I'll keep it as simple as possible. Let's start off by making a bool, so serialized field private bool, and we'll call it use Steam, which is false by default. And all this will do is we'll use it in our code to say when we try and host a lobby, if we're not using Steam, then just do it normally, so we can test with ourselves in the editor. And then before you do a build, make sure to check use Steam if you do want to. And then in that build, when people host, it will use Steam. So the next thing we need are some callbacks, because we'll be telling Steam, I want to make a lobby, I want to join this lobby. And when we do those, they'll take a certain amount of time to get back to us to actually say whether it worked or not. So we need to use these callbacks from Steam to actually listen in for those events effectively. They're pretty much events. So the way you write these is protected callback. And then inside the angle bracket, the type is the event type. So the first one we're going to have is lobby created. And then just because of the naming, it ends in _t. And then what we can do here is if we give this a name, so lobby created, we can now import Steamworks here using Steamworks, and then it will be okay. Then we need two more of these. So we'll get one for lobby created, and then the second one is for game lobby join requested, which is when we request to join a game lobby. And then we can just call this game lobby join requested. Then the third callback is when Steam tells us that we've entered a lobby. So lobby enter. And we'll call it lobby entered. So these will all be responses from Steam when we try and do various things. So what we can do is we can make a start method, private void start. And we can say here, if we don't want to use Steam, so if not use Steam, return. If we do want to use Steam, then we need to set up all of these callbacks, because currently they just exist, but we need to actually register them. So the way you do that is you say lobby created equals callback of type, in this case, lobby created. Lobby created. And then there is a function here called create, so .create, and you pass in the function you want it to call when this is sent. So when Steam tells us a lobby is created, we then want to run this method. So let's make a method, private void on lobby created, and it will take in a lobby created data type, and we'll just call this the callback. And then we can just simply put that name in there, and it's set up. We then need to do it for the other two. So game lobby join requested equals callback of type, and then game lobby join requested dot create, and then we make a method for it. So let's make two more of these methods. So we've got on game lobby join requested without the T, and then with the T there. And then for the other one, the lobby entered. So on lobby entered of type lobby enter. And then we can hook all those up. So here it's game lobby join requested, or requested. And then it's finally lobby entered equals callback of type lobby entered dot create, and then the function to call on lobby entered. So now Steam will call these three methods for us when these three actions happen. So when a lobby is created on Steam's end, it will call on lobby created. And we now need to actually just trigger these various things. So all we're going to do when we try and start hosting is say, well, if we want to use Steam, then when we start hosting, we're going to here say Steam matchmaking dot, and there's a create lobby method, and you need to pass in the lobby type. So there's an enum for this, lobby type, here it is, dot, and this is up to you what kind of lobby it is. So I'm going to say it's only for friends, so people on my friends list can join it. And then how many max members? Well, I'm going to say 4 for my game, and then I'm going to return. So if I hit the host button and I'm not using Steam, we just start a host. But if I am using Steam, we want to wait until Steam has created us a lobby on Steam's side, and that lobby will just be to store some Steam players together. And then when it tells us that a lobby is being created successfully, we can then actually start hosting. So in onLobby created, we get this result back from Steam. So we can say if the callback dot result does not equal, and then it's results dot, and there's so many different ones you can check for, but we want to say if it's not okay, then we want to turn the landing page panel back on. It means Steam failed to create us a lobby for some reason. Whoops. And then return. But if it didn't fail, then it obviously succeeded. So we'll start a host, network manager.singleton.start host. And then we need a way for other players to actually connect to us, because normally you enter their IP or put in localhost for yourself. But on Steam, you actually connect to people via their Steam ID. And when someone joins a Steam lobby, like we just created a lobby here, when someone joins our lobby, we need to send that person our ID, the host's ID, and then they'll try and connect to that ID. So how it works is in Steam matchmaking, you can set some lobby data, which is just simply some data you can set tied into a particular lobby, and it'll just stay there. And that means that I, as another client joining, can get lobby data, so I can read whatever it is you save there. So to set lobby data, you need to pass in the ID of your lobby, which is a new, and then they use this object called cSteamID, and you pass in the lobby ID, which we actually get from this callback. So when a lobby is created, we can get its ID. So callback dot this UL Steam ID lobby. Let's put it onto a new line and go to the second parameter. We need a key, which is just what we'll use to set and get the value. So we can call this the host address, or the host, yeah, we'll call it the host address. And then for the final parameter, the actual value is my user's ID. So Steam user dot get Steam ID, so it gets my Steam ID, but we want it as a string, so dot to string. So now we've set in the lobby some data where the key is host address and the value is my ID as the host. So now a client who joins can call Steam matchmaking.get lobby data host address, and it will return this ID. The next method, so what happens when a friend clicks on my friends list and hits join? Well, what do we want to do? We want to say Steam matchmaking.join lobby, and the lobby we want to join is this callback here, callback dot Steam ID lobby. Simple. And then once they've joined, what do we want to happen? Well, we want to say over here, this gets called even if you as a host join your own lobby. So we want to say if we're running as a server, so if network server.active, then just return. We don't want to do anything else if we're the host. But if we're not the host, we then want to grab this value from Steam, this host address. So we can say here, string host address equals Steam matchmaking dot get lobby data, as opposed to set lobby data. And you pass in the lobby ID. So yeah, again, new cSteamID, and then you get it from callback.SteamID lobby. Let's put this onto a new line again. And then the second parameter is the key we want to get the value for, which is, as a string, host address. So you could put this string as a const in this file, so you don't have to type it twice, but I think it's fine for this. And then we'll stick on a semicolon. So what happens is my friend joins the server. They're not running as a server, so that doesn't return. Then they grab the host address value, which is my Steam ID, and then they're going to say network manager.singleton.network address equals this host address. And then they're going to start as a client. So network manager.singleton.start client, which will connect them to this address. And then finally, landing page panel.setActive false, and we're done. That's all the coding. It's quite complex coding, but there's not a lot of it really. So simply we start, and if we want to use Steam, we get ready for all these callbacks from Steam. Then when we hit the host button, if we're using Steam, we create a lobby on Steam's servers. So Steam will store this lobby, and that's how friends can see when they right click on me that they can join. And then when the lobby is created successfully, we start hosting in Mirror, and we set some lobby data, which is that the host address is my Steam ID. When a friend tries to join, it won't do anything else in here. It'll just immediately join. You could add extra stuff in here if you wanted, but joining is just fine. And then when they successfully do enter, we say, so long as they're not the host, grab the address of the host, set it, and start a client. So now if I go back into Unity and let it compile, I should be able to then check use Steam and make sure the network manager is set up correctly. So it's got 4 max connections using Fizzy Steamworks. This is all on. So I should be able to now build and run. Now that it's done, you want to head over to Steam, go up to Games at the top and add a non-Steam game to my library, browse, and go find where the game is. So I know it's in my Unity projects, and the project is called Real-Time Strategy, and then it's in builds, and here it is, realtimestrategy.exe. I'll open and hit add selected programs. Then it shows up in my Steam library, and if I hit play, it'll then open up the game. Now that it's open, I'm going to hit host. It'll start the lobby, and then now I just need to wait for my friend to join. For your friend to join, make sure they already have the game open the same way you did, and then head to their friends list, find you, right click on them, and hit join game. And then here we see we've got player 2. So if I hit start, then the game starts and it's working. So I can now come in, drag in my buildings, and I can start producing some units, and his base is up at the top over there. He doesn't really know how to play, so he's not really going to get anything, but I can now take my units and go over and destroy them. So yeah, that's it for this lecture. We now have it working so that you can make your game easily joinable through Steam. So your friends can just right click on you on Steam if you're hosting a lobby, hit join game, and they're now in your lobby and you can play the game. So now we're done with all the features for the course. There's a bit more tweaking of unit stats that I need to do because the attack range and the move range was a little bit off there, and that's because I must have rushed in one of the previous lectures when trying to make my units. So if you took your time and were a bit more sensible than me and patient, then you might have got that working with no problems. But as for hosting your game and using the Steam Relay to connect to your friends, it all works. I hope you enjoyed the course, and I highly encourage you to take the knowledge you've learnt and use it to make your own game of a different genre that you may have been wanting to make. So now you can take this and try and make an FPS or a card game or whatever else you want to do, maybe a platformer. If there are any other features you think should be implemented, you can let us know on the forums, on the community forums, and then we can look at the most popular suggestions and maybe add some more content in the future. But that's it for now, so I'll see you next time. Goodbye.